Lena and her friends were returning from a party in a small town far from the busy highways. It was past midnight when their old SUV pulled onto a narrow road surrounded by dense forest. Fog drifted over the ground, and the road seemed endless. "It's so empty here," Lena said, looking out the window. "There aren't even any streetlights." "It's a country road." Anton, the driver, grinned. "What did you expect? A highway?" I have a strange feeling," she added quietly, averting her gaze. The company drove in silence until the old receiver began to hiss. Instead of music, there were strange whispers, as if someone was speaking directly into the speaker. "What the?" Anton reached for the tuning knob, but the sound did not stop. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of them. It was a woman in old-fashioned clothes. She stood right in the middle of the road, and her face was hidden by a thick fog. Anton pressed the brakes sharply, but the car did not seem to stop in time. There was a thud. "Did you hit her?" Lena screamed, grabbing her seatbelt. Everyone jumped out of the car, but there was no one on the road. "I definitely saw her. We hit her." Anton was clutching his head, looking around. "There's no one here," said Vika, Lena's friend. She looked at the empty road, lit only by headlights. Suddenly, a strange sound like crying came from the forest. It was faint, but clearly audible. "It's her," Lena whispered. "We have to get out of here." "No, we have to make sure she's all right," Anton said stubbornly. No sooner had they taken a step than the headlights began to blink. A woman appeared on the road, right in front of the car. Her face was finally visible. It was pale, and her eyes seemed empty, like a doll's. "You made a mistake," came a cold voice. Lena felt her heart freeze. The woman raised her hand and pointed toward the forest. "The curse of the lonely road is yours now," she said, and her figure vanished as if dissolved into mist. The engine of the car stopped, and the surroundings became eerily quiet. The boys felt that they were trapped on a road where none of the rules of reality applied anymore. The car stood motionless. The engine was no longer responding, and a thick fog was thickening around the road. Ahead lay only endless emptiness, behind the road disappearing in a milky haze. Anton desperately turned the key in the ignition. "Damn, it just won't start," he shouted, hitting the steering wheel with his fist. It's because of her," Lena whispered, sitting in the back seat. "She did something." "Did you hear what she said? The curse of the lonely road," Vika added, her voice shaking. "What does that even mean?" Anton wasn't listening to them. He got out of the car and walked around it, trying to find some reason why the engine had stalled. But everything looked normal, except for one detail. There was a strange mark imprinted on the hood, like a palm, but with long, thin fingers, as if they were not human. "No, we have to make sure she's all right," Anton said stubbornly. No sooner had they taken a step than the headlights began to blink. A woman appeared on the road, right in front of the car. Her face was finally visible. It was pale, and her eyes seemed empty, like a doll's. "You made a mistake," came a cold voice. Lena felt her heart freeze. The woman raised her hand and pointed toward the forest. "The curse of the lonely road is yours now," she said, and her figure vanished as if dissolved into mist. The engine of the car stopped, and the surroundings became eerily quiet. The boys felt that they were trapped on a road where none of the rules of reality applied anymore. The car stood motionless. The engine was no longer responding, and a thick fog was thickening around the road. Ahead lay only endless emptiness, behind the road disappearing in a milky haze. Anton desperately turned the key in the ignition. "Damn, it just won't start," he shouted, hitting the steering wheel with his fist. It's because of her," Lena whispered, sitting in the back seat. "She did something." "Did you hear what she said? The curse of the lonely road," Vika added, her voice shaking. "What does that even mean?" Anton wasn't listening to them. He got out of the car and walked around it, trying to find some reason why the engine had stalled. But everything looked normal, except for one detail. There was a strange mark imprinted on the hood, like a palm, but with long, thin fingers, as if they were not human. At that moment, the forest came alive. Whispers sounded everywhere, mingling with cries and distant laughter. Anton's lantern flickered, and for a moment they saw her. The woman stood between the trees, still in the same old-fashioned dress, but now her face seemed inhuman. It was distorted, and her eyes glowed with a dim yellow light. "You're here now," she whispered. "There's no turning back." Vika took a step back. but felt a cold hand grab her shoulder. She turned around and screamed. Behind her stood a man, or something that resembled him. His face was obscured by shadows and his clothes looked worn, like those who had been wandering here for years. "You're staying here too," the creature wheezed. Anton grabbed Lena's arm and shouted, "Run!" But Lena stopped and pointed to a road sign that somehow ended up right in front of them. It had words on it that neither of them expected to see. "Make a choice, either stay, or give up the one who will lead us on." The fog began to thicken around them, cutting off their paths back. The whispers grew louder, as if the forest itself was communicating with them. The road sign in front of them glowed with a dim, dead light, and the inscription "Make a choice" seemed to burn in the eyes of each of them. Anton, Lena, and Vika stood motionless, not knowing what to do. "It's a trap," Anton muttered. "They're playing with us." "No, it's a choice," Lena whispered, feeling her heart clench. "They want to leave someone behind." "Leave it? Are you serious?" Vika shouted, looking around. "We can't leave someone here. We don't have a choice." Anton clenched his fists. His voice was trembling. "Did you see those creatures? If we don't decide, they'll take everyone." Lena looked at the sign, then at her friends. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. At that moment, a voice came out of the fog, cold and loud. "Time is running out." The fog around them began to move as if alive. Figures began to emerge from it. They were people, or what was left of them. Their bodies were covered in cracks like dried clay, and their eyes glowed with a pale yellow light. They slowly surrounded the trio. "Get back," Anton shouted, waving his flashlight. One of the creatures took a step forward and held out his hand. His face was devoid of emotion, but his voice sounded clear. "One of you must stay, just one." Vika shook her head. "We can't do this, it's crazy." "Then you'll all stay," the creature replied, and an ominous whisper-like chuckle was heard all around. Lena, gripped by panic, remembered the woman on the road and her words. She was right. The curse of this road was more than just a mystical phenomenon. This place lived off those who found themselves here. "I'll do it," Lena said suddenly. Her voice sounded firm, though her hands were trembling. "No," Anton shouted, grabbing her arm. "Are you crazy? We'll think of something." "We don't have time," she said, pulling her hand away. "If we don't make a choice, no one will get out of here." Lena stepped forward slowly, addressing the creature. "I'm staying. Let them go." The creature tilted its head as if pondering, and then spoke. "You have chosen." The fog began to thicken around Lena, covering her figure. She felt the cold that burned her skin and heard whispers that grew louder. "Lena," Vika shouted, but she couldn't move. Anton tried to break through to Lena, but he was stopped by an invisible force. He saw her face at the last moment. She was smiling, although tears were rolling down her cheeks. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. When the fog cleared, Anton and Vika found themselves standing in the middle of the road. The forest was gone, and there was an empty plain all around. The car stood still, its engine running as if nothing had happened. She disappeared," Vika whispered, sinking to the ground. Anton looked at the sign, which now read, "One pays for all. The cycle continues." Getting into the car, they drove away in silence, realizing that they could never return to this road. But in their memories will forever remain the foggy whispers and the face of Lena, who gave herself so that they could live. Several weeks passed after that night. Anton and Vika tried to return to normal life, but the memories of what happened did not let them go. Especially painful was the realization that Lena remained there, in the fog, and that there was nothing they could do for her. Anton began to notice strange things. He constantly felt as if someone was watching him. A handprint, long and thin, like the mark on the hood, appeared periodically on the window of his car, and at night he heard whispers. The words were barely recognizable, but the voice reminded him of Lena. One day he couldn't stand it and called Vika. "Do you feel that she is with us?" he asked. "Yes," Vika answered in a trembling voice. "Last night I heard her voice. She was calling me." Anton was silent. These words only confirmed his worst fears. The curse did not let them go. Anton decided to return to that road, despite Vicky's entreaties not to. Taking a flashlight and a map with him, he set off into the night. Just like that time, he knew it was crazy, but the guilt he felt for Lena kept him going. As he pulled onto the road, he immediately felt the world around him begin to change. The forest was thicker again, and fog began to drift across the ground. The car's engine coughed and the headlight began to flicker. A figure appeared up ahead. It was a woman in white. Anton stopped and got out of the car, trying to keep his cool. "Where is Lena?" he shouted into the void. "I know she's here." The woman silently pointed toward the forest. Anton, without thinking, ran there. The forest was gloomy and strangely alive. Whispers surrounded him. The sounds grew louder, but he distinguished the words. "She is here." Anton ran until he came to a small clearing. In its center stood a mirror, tall and ancient, covered with cracks. Only he was reflected in it. But Lena suddenly appeared next to him. Her face was the same as he remembered it at the last moment, but her eyes were empty. "Lena," he shouted, rushing to the mirror. "You've come," she whispered. Her voice sounded like an echo. "But why?" "I want to save you," he answered, feeling his eyes fill with tears. "You can't," she muttered. "I'm part of this place now, but you can break the cycle." Anton froze. "How?" "This place feeds on fear and sacrifice," she said. "To free me and yourself, you must make a choice, stay here in my place, or destroy what holds us together." "What is it?" he asked. Lena pointed to the mirror. "Break it." Anton stared at the cracked mirror. His hands were trembling. "If I break it, what will happen to you?" "We could both disappear," Lena replied. "But if you do nothing, the curse will continue and I will stay here forever." Gathering all his courage, Anton picked up a stone lying nearby and swung it. "Forgive me, Lena," he whispered. He broke the mirror. At the moment of impact, the mirror shattered into thousands of shards, and a bright light flashed around it. Anton felt his whole body pierced by pain, and then he fell into darkness. When he woke up, he found himself on the same road. The car was standing nearby, the fog was gone, and the air was fresh. He heard a quiet voice behind him. "Thank you." Turning around, he saw Lena. She was smiling at him, but her body became more and more transparent until it disappeared completely. Anton realized that he had freed her, but the curse of the road still existed. Now he knew it was waiting for the next traveler.